Alright, so now welcome. Well, we're still talking about fractional terms, and this time we're going to be going through and doing some more practice because what we're going to be talking about and the whole goal of this lesson is to look at using, bringing in what we know about simplifying fractions into also identifying fractional terms. So let's go back and let's review some, let's go back and review some vocabulary. So, well, a turn is a movement around a center point. Remember that example that I drew yesterday, that I put in the last video, that if my point is here, and I'm here, and if I go around and all the way back to where I started, that is considered a full turn. Now, a fractional turn is going to be any movement that's going to be less than a full turn. So again, put my point there. And I go from here, and I just go to here. And so that will be considered a fractional turn because it's not a full turn, it's less than a full turn. And then, how do we measure turns? Well, we measure turns in degrees because a degree is the size of a turn, and the unit we're going to have is going to be a little superscript O that's going to represent degrees. So let's look at our first example. For our first example, we're looking at the size of this turn. Where the turn went from 0 to 30. So, well, how do we identify that turn? Well, we identify that that is going to be 30 3/60ths of a full turn. Or we can identify pretty much the common way that you always see turns and angles identified is just as a 30-degree turn. So that's one way to identify a turn. And I'm going to be asking you to probably look at both of them, here and also here. So now let's go through and let's look at another example. Again, we're trying to identify the size of the turn two ways. So I'm starting here and I went all the way to here. So the size of that turn. So I went from here to here. Wow, that arc looks familiar. That's almost like how we identify angles. So this is going to be 140 3/60ths of a full turn. Or we just say that that is just 140 degree. Or that's a 140 degree turn. So now let's go through and let's look at another example. And this time we're going to take it a step further because this is where I'm going to bring in that simplifying of a fraction so I also identify that turn. So if we're looking at this turn going from here to here, and I can probably even put one of those there, that well we can say that this is 90 3/60ths of a full turn. We can also say that that's going to be a 90-degree turn. Well, when we look at our fractions, we try to find our greatest common factor of all of 90 and 360. That we find out that our greatest common factor of 90 and 360 is actually 90. So that we can actually reduce 90 3/60ths by 90. So if we divide the numerator and the denominator by 90, well, we find out that 90 divided by 90 is 1, and 90 3/60 divided by 90 is 4. So we can also identify 90 3/60 of a full turn or a 90-degree turn as also 1/4 of a, put that 8 a little bit too close there, of a full turn. Now we're only going to be looking at quarter turn, half turns, and 3/4 turns. Sometimes to step it up a little bit, we might have to do some reducing of some other fractional terms, but for the most part, we're just going to be looking at quarter terms, half terms, and three-quarter terms. So let's look at our last example. Now this last example, we start here and we go all the way around to here. So we're going to identify that term as 270 3/60ths of a full term, or 270 degree turn. Now, remember that we're bringing the simplifying of fractions into this, talking about identifying fractional terms. So when we look at the greatest common factor of 270 and 360, well, the greatest common factor is again going to be 90. So we do the same thing. 270, 360th, we're going to divide the numerator and the denominator by 90. 270 divided by 90 is 3. 360 divided by 90 is 4. So we say that this is 3/4 of a full term. And remember what I said at first, that we're just going to be looking at quarter turns, 1/4 turns, 1/2 turns, and 3/4 turns. And I know that was a long one, but this was just giving you some more information. And the next video, which is going to be shorter, is just going to be more practice for you. But that's the end of our lesson.